Her husband's family threw her into the rain before the flowers on his grave had even begun to wilt. Claire Bennett-Caldwell stood outside the iron gates of a Lake Forest mansion in a torn black dress, blood running across the finger where her wedding ring had been ripped away. Behind those gates were the people who had taken her home, her inheritance, and perhaps even her husband's life. But they had forgotten one thing. 3 years earlier, Claire had saved a dying stranger in a Chicago trauma room. Before he disappeared, he left her a number and a promise, one debt, no questions. Tonight, she finally made the call. What happened next would expose a family empire, uncover a buried murder, and turn a grieving widow into the one woman Chicago's most feared man could not walk away from. Stay until the end, like the video and comment where you're watching from. The black SUVs were still idling in the rain when Dominic Moretti stepped through the Caldwell gates. Claire remained wrapped in his coat, standing beside the armored sedan as if her body had forgotten how to move. Water ran from her hair to her jaw. Her left hand shook where the wedding ring had been torn away. Across the drive, the guards who had dragged her outside now stood with their shoulders tight and their eyes lowered. Dominic did not raise his voice. He did not have to. Who touched her? No one answered. The rain struck the stone between them. Richard Caldwell appeared in the mansion doorway with one hand resting inside his coat pocket. Margaret stood behind him, pale and rigid beneath the chandelier light. Richard looked past Dominic and fixed his eyes on Claire. "She is grieving," he said. "She has not been herself since Ethan died." Dominic turned slightly, just enough to look at the blood on Claire's mouth. "She looks very much like herself. This is a private family matter." Dominic's gaze returned to Richard. "You made it public when your men threw her into the street." Richard's jaw tightened. "You have no authority here." Dominic glanced toward the open gates, then toward the guards who had already backed away from them. "I seem to have enough." Claire felt the words move through the air like a locked door closing. Dominic did not order his men into the mansion. He did not threaten Richard with a weapon. Instead, he lifted one hand, and Marco DeLuca moved forward with a phone. "Photograph everything Dominic said." Marco took pictures of Claire's split lip, the bruises rising along her wrist, the torn seam of her dress, the blood beneath her fingernails, and the garbage bags lying in the rain. Another man collected the papers scattered near the driveway. Richard stepped down from the doorway. "You are trespassing." Dominic looked at the documents in his man's hand. "A voluntary waiver signed under physical force is not much of a legal instrument." She did not sign it. "No," Claire said. Her voice came out rough, but it carried. Every head turned toward her. She looked at Richard through the rain. "I did not sign anything." Something flashed across Richard's face. Not anger, calculation. Dominic noticed it too. "That was wise," he said. Richard's expression settled again. "You do not understand the situation." Dominic held out his hand. Marco gave him the torn waiver. He read the first page in silence. Claire watched the rain collect along the edge of his black hair. There was no hurry in him. That was what made the scene feel unreal. Everyone around him looked afraid of time. Dominic looked as if time belonged to him. He folded the document once. "Richard, you will preserve every security recording from this property. You will not contact her employer, her bank, or anyone connected to her husband's estate. You will not destroy a file, alter a record, or move a dollar." Richard gave a short, humorless laugh. "You cannot dictate terms to me." Dominic stepped closer. "I just did." For the first time, Margaret spoke. "Claire, come inside. We can handle this without spectacle." Claire looked at the open doorway. For 4 years she had walked through it carefully. She had learned which rooms she was welcome in and which silences meant she had said too much. She had smiled at donors' hosted dinners and stood beside Ethan while his mother corrected the way she held a wine glass. Now she saw only the place where they had held her down and taken his ring from her finger. "No," she said. Margaret's mouth tightened. Dominic turned to Claire. "Can you walk, yes?" It was not entirely true. He seemed to know that, but he did not embarrass her by offering his arm in front of them. Instead, he opened the rear door of the sedan. Claire took one step, then another. Her knees trembled. The wet stones blurred beneath her. A guard shifted near the gate. Dominic looked at him. The man froze. Claire reached the car. Before she climbed inside, she looked back at Richard. "My ring." Richard's hand remained inside his coat. "You no longer have any claim to Caldwell property." The sentence struck deeper than the violence. Claire's breath caught. Dominic watched Richard for a moment. Then he said, "Keep it safe." Richard's eyes narrowed. Dominic's voice stayed calm. "I would hate for anything to happen to something I intend to recover." Claire entered the car. Dominic followed. The door closed, sealing out the storm. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The sedan moved away from the estate. Through the rain-streaked window, Claire watched the mansion disappear behind the iron gates. She had arrived there as Ethan's wife. She left carrying her life in garbage bags. Dominic sat across from her with one hand resting near his knee. He wore a dark suit beneath the missing overcoat. His white shirt was spotless except for a thin smear of her blood near the cuff. Claire stared at it. "I ruined your coat." He looked at her. "It is a coat. I am sorry. You are injured. I have been injured before. That does not make this less serious." She turned toward the window. Streetlights passed in long, wet lines. Her reflection looked unfamiliar. Hair plastered to her face, makeup running beneath her eyes, a dark bruise forming at her temple. "I should not have called you." Dominic did not answer immediately. "Why did you?" The question was not accusing. That made it harder. Claire looked at her hands. "I had nowhere else." He studied her face. "That is not the same as regret. I do not know what this is yet. That is fair." The car turned south. Claire tried to remember the last time someone in the Caldwell family had answered her honestly. It had been Ethan. The thought hurt so sharply that she pressed her lips together. Dominic saw it. "Tell me where you are hurt." "I am fine." "No." The single word was quiet. Claire looked up. He continued, "You are not required to be fine in this car." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him that being fine had become a reflex. At the hospital, she had been fine after 12-hour shifts, after children died, after families screamed at her because grief needed somewhere to go. In the Caldwell house, she had been fine when Margaret corrected her, when Richard ignored her, when Ethan came home late and said he could not explain why. She had been fine beside Ethan's coffin. She had been fine while they took her ring. Now in the back seat of a Mafia boss's car, the word felt impossible. "My wrist," she said, "my ribs, my head. Did you lose consciousness?" "No." "Are you sure?" "Yes." Dominic tapped once on the partition. "Call Dr. Sloan." The driver nodded. Claire straightened. "I do not need a private doctor." "You need a doctor who will not report to Richard Caldwell." That silenced her. The sedan entered downtown Chicago. Towers rose through the rain, their windows glowing above the river. Traffic moved in slow ribbons beneath them. The car stopped in front of a historic hotel built from pale stone and black iron. The sign above the entrance read Belladonna. Claire had passed it before. Ethan once told her the rooms cost more per night than most people paid in rent. Men in dark coats opened the doors. Dominic stepped out first. This time he offered Claire his hand. She hesitated. His hand remained where it was. No pressure, no command. Claire placed her fingers in his. His grip closed carefully around hers. Inside the lobby was quiet and warm. Brass lamps cast golden light across dark wood, old books, and arrangements of white flowers. A pianist played softly near the bar. No one stared at Dominic. No one appeared surprised by the armed men at the entrance. Claire looked around. "This is yours?" "Yes." "I thought you owned clubs." "I own several things people misunderstand." He led her toward a private elevator. The doors opened before they reached it. On the top floor, a woman in navy medical scrubs waited outside a suite. "Claire, this is Dr. Evelyn Sloan," Dominic said. "She will examine you." Claire looked at the doctor. Dr. Sloan's expression was direct but kind. "I will need to document the injuries," she said. "You decide what happens to the documentation." Claire glanced at Dominic. He understood. "I will be outside." He left without argument. The suite was larger than the first apartment Claire had rented after nursing school. Tall windows overlooked the river. A fire burned behind glass. Clean clothes had been placed on the bed. Tea steamed on a tray beside a bowl of soup. Dr. Sloan cleaned the cut on Claire's lip and checked her pupils. "You may have a mild concussion." "I do not feel dizzy. Trauma nurses are terrible patients." Claire almost smiled. The doctor examined her wrist. These bruises came from restraint. Claire looked away. Dr. Sloan did not ask who did it. She photographed the marks, treated the abrasions, and wrapped 2 of Claire's fingers. "You need rest," she said. "No alcohol, no driving. If you vomit, lose consciousness, or become confused, call me immediately. I am already confused." Dr. Sloan paused. "That kind I cannot treat." After the doctor left, Claire changed into black trousers and a soft gray sweater. The sleeves covered most of the bruising. She washed her face. The water in the sink turned faintly pink. When she returned to the sitting room, Dominic was standing by the window. His jacket was gone. The rain had darkened his shirt at the shoulders. He had not moved the tea. He had not touched the soup. Claire sat on the edge of the sofa. "You waited." "Yes. For the doctor. For you." She looked at him. He took the chair across from her, leaving space between them. For the first time since the cars arrived, the room was quiet enough for Claire to hear the fire. She studied Dominic's face. 3 years had sharpened him. At the hospital, he had looked dangerous, even while bleeding onto a trauma bed. Now he looked controlled, as if every emotion had been trained to stand behind a closed door. "You remembered me," she said. "I remember everyone who has held my life in their hands. I was doing my job. You were doing more than your job." The memory returned in fragments. A winter night, blood on blue sheets, 2 armed men blocking a hospital corridor, Dominic half conscious beneath surgical lights. At the time, she had not known his name. A man with a gunshot wound had been brought through the service entrance shortly after midnight. The 2 men with him refused to give identification. One wore a shoulder holster beneath his coat. The other kept checking the elevators. Claire had stepped between them and the trauma bay. "If you want him alive, you stand outside." The taller one, Marco, had stared at her. "You do not understand. I understand that he is losing blood and you are in my way." Dominic had been conscious enough to hear her. Even then his eyes had been steady. The bullet had entered below the ribs. Claire cut through his shirt, started 2 lines, ordered blood, and kept pressure on the wound while the attending surgeon was delayed. One of Dominic's men had tried to use a phone inside the bay. Claire slapped it from his hand. "This is not your office." The man had looked ready to threaten her. Dominic spoke from the table. "Listen to her." His voice was barely there, but the man obeyed. Claire never asked who shot him. She never asked why no police report had been filed. She cared only that no one else in the hospital became collateral damage. After surgery, when Dominic was stable, Marco had approached her near the lockers. He offered cash. Claire refused. The next day she found the laminated card inside her locker. Dominic had appeared behind her, pale from blood loss, but dressed as if he had walked out of a board meeting. "One debt," he said. "No questions." Claire held out the card. "I do not want this. You may someday. I saved you because you were bleeding." "I know. Then why give me a favor?" His expression had not changed. Because people who do the right thing without asking for payment are often the first people destroyed by those who do not. She had thought the sentence dramatic. Now she was sitting in his hotel wearing clothes someone had purchased in her size while the bruises darkened beneath the fabric. "You were right," Claire said. Dominic's gaze held hers. "I wish I had not been." She looked down. "Did you know who I married?" "Yes." Her head lifted. "How I saw the announcement. You read wedding announcements, not usually." The answer hung between them. Claire was too tired to ask what it meant. Dominic continued. "I knew Ethan Caldwell by reputation. He was considered the decent son. He was decent. I did not say he was not. He hated what his family did to people. Did he hate it enough to leave Claire look toward the window? No. The truth hurt because she had defended Ethan for years. He had always promised they would leave, after the next quarter, after the next board meeting, after his father stabilized the company, after his mother recovered from surgery. There was always another reason. Claire met Ethan at a hospital charity gala. He had stood near the silent auction table wearing a tuxedo he clearly disliked. While everyone else posed for photographs, he had been reading the information sheet for a pediatric trauma fund. Claire was carrying 2 glasses of water when he stepped backward into her. One glass spilled down the front of his shirt. He looked at the stain and said, "You have improved this suit." She laughed before she could stop herself. He returned to the hospital the next week. No photographers, no assistant. He spent 4 hours moving donated equipment. They had coffee in the cafeteria. He listened when she spoke. That was what she loved first. Richard disliked her immediately. Margaret was more subtle. She praised Claire's dress, then asked whether it had been difficult to find something appropriate. She introduced Claire as Ethan's friend long after the engagement. Ethan defended her in private. In public, he tried to keep peace. Claire told herself peace was temporary. Then they married. The wedding ring had belonged to Ethan's grandmother. Platinum, simple, with a narrow line of small diamonds. 2 weeks before the crash, Ethan asked for it. "The setting is loose," he said. Claire had not noticed anything. He took it to a jeweler and returned it 3 days later. The ring felt slightly heavier, but she assumed the band had been reinforced. Now Richard had ripped it from her hand. Dominic leaned forward. "Why did they take the ring?" Margaret said. "It belonged to the family." "Do you believe that was the reason?" Claire rubbed the wrapped finger. "It was Ethan's grandmother's. Richard Caldwell does not order violence over sentiment." She remembered Ethan turning the ring in his hand before giving it back. He had looked tired. "What is it?" she had asked. "Nothing. You are a terrible liar." He smiled, but the smile never reached his eyes. "Keep it on." At the time, she thought it was affection. Now the memory felt different. Dominic saw the change in her expression. "What are you remembering?" Ethan had it repaired before the accident. "Was it damaged?" "I do not think so." "When?" 2 weeks before." Dominic sat back. "Did he say where he took it?" "No." Claire closed her eyes. The final months of her marriage returned in pieces. Ethan locking his study door. Ethan checking the rearview mirror while driving. Ethan waking at 3 in the morning and walking through the house barefoot. One night she found him in the kitchen with a glass of water he had not touched. "Are you in trouble?" she asked. He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "If something happens to me, remember that my father never gives anything away." She had assumed he meant the company. She had kissed his forehead and told him to come back to bed. 3 weeks later, his car hit a concrete barrier on Lakeshore Drive. He survived the crash. That was the part no one talked about. For 11 days, he remained in a private hospital wing under the care of Dr. Samuel Crane, the Caldwell family physician. Claire had argued about his medication. Ethan was too sedated. His breathing changed after each dose. Crane told her the injuries were complicated. Richard told her to let the doctors work. Margaret said Claire's anxiety was upsetting the staff. On the final night, they asked her to go home and sleep. She refused. Security escorted her from the floor after Richard produced a temporary medical proxy. Ethan died before sunrise. Claire pressed a hand to her mouth. Dominic's voice softened. "Who signed the proxy, Ethan? Did you see him sign it?" "No." "Did you see the document only after? Was the signature his?" "I thought so." "That is not the same answer." Claire looked at him. "No," she whispered. It was not quite right. The room seemed to tilt. She stood too quickly. Dominic rose at once. Claire moved toward the window and placed both hands against the glass. Below, the Chicago River reflected the city in broken gold. "I should have seen it. You were grieving. I was a nurse. You were his wife. I knew his breathing was wrong." Dominic came closer but did not touch her. "Who controlled his medication, Crane? Who hired Crane, Richard?" The words entered the room and did not leave. Claire turned around. "Do you think they killed him?" Dominic did not protect her with a lie. "I think there are enough questions to begin looking." She searched his face. "And if the answers are worse, they often are." Claire looked at the empty place on her finger. "What happens now? I can recover your belongings. I can put you somewhere Richard cannot reach. Boston, Seattle, outside the country. You want me to leave? I want you alive." She shook her head. "I spent 4 years making myself smaller so they would accept me. I stopped correcting Margaret. I stopped asking Ethan why he came home afraid. I told myself patience was love." Dominic listened without interruption. "I buried my husband 2 days ago," Claire continued. "Tonight his family threw me outside like garbage. They took my name off the house, froze me out of his life, and stole the last thing he gave me." Her voice steadied. "I am not leaving Chicago." Dominic's eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you want my ring?" He waited. Claire looked at him fully. "And I want to know what happened to Ethan." Dominic stepped closer. If we begin, Richard Caldwell will stop treating you like a grieving widow. He will treat you as a threat. Claire thought of Richard's hand around her jaw. He already does. No, tonight he believed you were alone. The words settled between them. Claire glanced toward the suite door where Marco stood beyond the glass, then toward the city below. And now Dominic's gaze did not leave hers. Now he knows he was wrong. Claire drew a slow breath. I do not want you to kill him. Dominic showed no reaction. I did not say I would. You did not have to. A faint shadow of amusement touched his face. You remember me well. I remember the armed men in my trauma bay. They were nervous. They were carrying guns. The two conditions are not mutually exclusive. Claire almost smiled. It disappeared quickly. I mean it. I want the truth. I want evidence. I want Ethan's name cleared. And if the legal system refuses to help you, then we make it impossible for them to look away. Dominic studied her for several seconds. He seemed to be deciding whether she understood what she was asking. Finally, he reached into his pocket and took out his phone. He called someone. A woman answered. Vanessa, he said, open a file on Caldwell Continental. A pause. How wide, Richard? Margaret, Ethan, Charles Whitman, Dr. Samuel Crane, every subsidiary lender shell company, trust medical record, and security contract connected to them. Claire watched him. Vanessa asked something else. Dominic looked at the bruises on Claire's wrist. All the way back. He ended the call. Claire returned to the sofa and sat down. The soup had gone cold. Dominic picked up the tray. You need to eat. I am not hungry. That is not relevant. She looked at him. You give orders very naturally. Yes, I am not one of your people. No. Then stop ordering me. Dominic set the tray down in front of her. Eat 3 bites. Claire stared at him. Was that an order? A negotiation. She took 1 spoonful. Dominic sat across from her. The soup was warm enough to hurt her throat. She swallowed. 2 more, he said. She gave him a tired look. He said nothing. Claire ate 2 more bites. Happy, no. Why? Because you are still bleeding. She touched her lip. It stopped. Not there. Claire went still. Dominic did not explain. He did not have to. Outside, the rain continued to move across Chicago. In Lake Forest, Richard Caldwell still had a ring. Somewhere in the city, files were being opened, records were being searched, and names that had lived behind polished doors were being placed under light. Claire wrapped both hands around the bowl. For the first time since Ethan's funeral, she did not feel safe. But she no longer felt helpless. Across from her, Dominic's phone lit up. A message from Vanessa filled the screen. He read it once. Then his expression changed. Claire noticed. What is it? Dominic turned the phone toward her. On the screen was a copy of Ethan's will. The signature was his. The date was wrong. Claire stared at the date beneath Ethan's signature. It was listed as March 18th, the day Ethan had been unconscious in intensive care. For several seconds, the room made no sound except the rain tapping against the windows. Then Claire set the bowl down. That is not possible. Dominic took the phone back and enlarged the document. Vanessa pulled it from the probate filing. Claire leaned closer. The signature looked like Ethan's from a distance. The long first stroke, the narrow curve in the C, the slight pressure mark beneath the final letter. But the more she looked, the less familiar it became. Ethan's signature had always leaned forward as if even his handwriting was in a hurry to escape the Caldwell name. This one stood too straight, too careful, too perfect. They copied it, Claire said. Dominic watched her face. You are certain I signed hospital forms beside him for years. I watched him sign mortgage papers, charity checks, anniversary cards. He never wrote his name like this when he was tired. She pointed to the final letter. He always dragged the line downward. He hated the way his father signed things, so he made his different. Dominic looked at the document again. Vanessa found 2 versions. Claire turned toward him. 2-1 was filed with the court. The other existed for less than 9 minutes on a private Caldwell server before someone deleted it. What was different? The first version left you Ethan's personal accounts, the Lake Forest house, and his voting shares. Claire felt the blood drain from her face, and the filed version transfers almost everything into the Caldwell family trust. The words landed one by one. Her home, Ethan's money, his shares, his legal voice, all folded into Richard's hands. Claire stood. The room seemed too warm now. Dominic followed her with his eyes, but did not move. Who filed it? Charles Whitman, the family attorney. Claire saw him again at the funeral, standing near Richard beneath a black umbrella. He had offered condolences in a voice so polished that not one word sounded human. He had touched her elbow and told her not to concern herself with paperwork. Richard would handle everything. At the time, Claire had been grateful. Now she felt sick. Whitman came to the hospital, she said. When? The morning after Ethan's crash. He said he needed signatures for emergency corporate authority. Did Ethan sign anything in front of you? No. Did Whitman enter Ethan's room alone? Claire searched the memory. He was there with Richard and Dr. Crane. Dominic's expression hardened. Claire looked at the false date again. Can Vanessa prove it was created after Ethan died? She can prove the file metadata was altered. She can also prove the notary license had expired. Is that enough to ask questions? I am tired of questions. Dominic rose. So am I. He called Vanessa and placed the phone on speaker. Her voice filled the room. I found more. Claire moved closer. Vanessa continued. The will was generated from a document template used by Whitman's firm. The font package was updated 2 months after Ethan's death. Claire closed her eyes. A clean, mechanical fact. Impossible to explain away. What about the signatures? Dominic asked. I am sending them to a forensic document examiner, but Claire's right. Ethan's signature was traced from a corporate resolution he signed last year. Claire opened her eyes. Can Whitman be charged? Not from this alone. We need the original file's internal communication or a witness. Dominic asked, where is he? Gold Coast. Private club on Astor Street. He has been there for the last 90 minutes. Claire looked at the clock. It was after midnight. Why would a family attorney be at a club now? Vanessa answered. Because he has a gambling problem. Dominic's gaze sharpened. How bad? $7 million in private debt. Maybe more. Payments are moving through a consulting company tied to Caldwell Continental. Claire looked between them. Richard paid his debts. Some of them, Vanessa said. Enough to keep him useful. Dominic ended the call. Claire crossed her arms. You are going after Whitman. I am going to speak with him. At 1 a.m. He keeps unusual office hours. Claire took a step toward him. I am coming. No. The refusal came too quickly. She stared at him. You said Richard will treat me like a threat. He will. Then stop treating me like a patient. You have a concussion. A mild one. You were assaulted less than 2 hours ago, and the man who helped erase my husband is drinking 3 miles away. Dominic held her gaze. The silence stretched. Claire expected another order. Instead, he said, you will remain beside me. I can agree to that. You will do exactly what I say if the room becomes dangerous. That depends on what you say. His mouth almost moved. Close enough. Vanessa arrived 20 minutes later carrying a tablet and a garment bag. She was tall, dark-haired, and dressed in black trousers with a gray coat folded over one arm. Her eyes moved quickly, taking in Claire's wrapped fingers, swollen lip, and the borrowed sweater. I brought options, she said, lifting the garment bag. Nothing dramatic. Claire opened it. Inside was a dark green dress with long sleeves and a high neckline. I am not going to a party, no, Vanessa said. You are going into a room full of men who expect you to look broken. Claire ran her fingers across the fabric. Dominic said nothing. That made the choice easier. Claire changed. The dress fit closely at the waist but did not expose the bruises. Vanessa pinned Claire's hair back, covered the discoloration near her temple, and left the cut on her lip untouched. Claire noticed. Vanessa met her eyes in the mirror. Some things should be seen. The club on Astor Street had no sign. Only a black door beneath a stone archway and a man in a formal coat checking names. The doorman saw Dominic and stepped aside without asking for one. Inside, low amber lights reflected against dark wood and brass. Men sat in private booths beneath paintings that looked older than the building. The air smelled of expensive whiskey and old money. Conversation softened when Dominic entered. Then Claire stepped in beside him. The silence widened. She felt every eye move toward her. The widow from the newspapers, the outsider from the Caldwell family, the woman who had been thrown into the rain and somehow returned beside Dominic Moretti. Dominic placed one hand lightly against the center of her back, not guiding, not claiming, steadying. Claire did not look at him, but she felt the warmth of his palm through the dress. Charles Whitman sat near the rear of the room at a green felt table. Caldwell was across from him. Claire stopped. Dominic had not told her Richard was there. Perhaps he had not known. Richard noticed her first. His face did not change, but the hand holding his glass tightened. Whitman turned. The color left his cheeks. Dominic continued walking. Claire matched his pace. They reached the table. Richard remained seated. "You recover quickly," he said. Claire looked at the whiskey near his hand. "You drink quickly." Whitman cleared his throat. "Claire, this is neither the time nor the place." "For what?" "For an emotional confrontation." She looked at him. "You filed a false will while my husband was still warm." Several men nearby turned their heads. Whitman's eyes flicked toward Richard. "I filed the instrument provided to my office. The instrument was created after Ethan died." Richard set down his glass. "You are repeating accusations you do not understand." Claire faced him. "I understand dates." Dominic took the empty chair beside Whitman and sat. The ease of the motion changed the room more than any threat could have. "Charles," he said, "you appear nervous." Whitman forced a smile. "I am surprised." By the widow or by the document, Whitman said nothing. Vanessa remained several feet away near the bar, her tablet held against one arm. Dominic continued. "A man in your position should know that forged probate documents create difficulties." Richard's voice turned cold. "You have no standing in this matter." Dominic looked at Claire. "She does." Richard leaned back. "My son's estate is controlled by the family trust, according to a document created after his death, allegedly." Claire reached into her handbag and removed a printed page Vanessa had given her in the car. She laid it on the table. The notary license had expired. Whitman glanced down. The signature was traced from a corporate resolution, Claire continued. The document template did not exist when Ethan was alive. Richard looked at Whitman, only for a second. It was enough. Claire saw fear pass between them. Not fear of Dominic, fear of evidence. Whitman pushed the page away. "This proves nothing." Dominic folded his hands. "Your debt proves more." Whitman froze. Richard's eyes narrowed. Dominic spoke as if discussing the weather. $7 million, hidden through advisory fees from Caldwell subsidiaries. A careless arrangement. Whitman looked at Richard. Richard did not look back. Claire understood the balance between them. Whitman had believed Richard would protect him. Richard had already begun deciding whether Whitman was expendable. Dominic saw it too. "Charles," he said, "men like Richard value loyalty only while it remains useful." Richard's voice cut across the table. "Do not speak for me." Dominic turned his head. "I was speaking about you." Claire watched Whitman's hand tremble against the edge of the table. Richard stood. "This performance is over." Dominic remained seated. "No, it has finally begun." Richard looked toward the club security. No one moved. That was when Claire understood the room belonged to Dominic in ways that had nothing to do with ownership papers. Richard saw it too. His face tightened. Dominic took out his phone and placed it on the table. A financial chart glowed on the screen. "North Star Systems," he said. Richard's expression changed. Claire had heard the name once from Ethan. A technology company building real-time cargo routing software for freight terminals. Richard had called it the future of the family. Dominic continued. "You are acquiring it for $860 million. Whitman looked toward Richard. "You have 3 days before closing," Dominic said. $400 million is financed through a private debt structure backed by Caldwell port assets. Richard's voice was controlled. "That information is confidential." "Not anymore." Richard stared at him. Dominic swiped the screen. A second document appeared. "I purchased a critical position in the debt this afternoon." Claire looked at him. Richard laughed once. "You cannot buy $400 million in debt in an afternoon. It was expensive. That facility is locked. It was poorly written. You are bluffing." Dominic looked toward Vanessa. She touched the screen of her tablet. Richard's phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. Then Whitman's phone lit up. Then another man across the room received a call and looked toward Richard. Dominic said, "The first lender has suspended release." Richard answered his phone. He listened. His face hardened. "No, you do not have authority to do that." The voice on the other end continued. Richard stood in silence. When he ended the call, Dominic was watching him. "One promise removed," Dominic said. Richard slipped the phone into his pocket. You have no idea what you are interfering with. I know exactly what I am interfering with. Claire looked at Richard. For the first time in her life, she saw him without the certainty that usually surrounded him. Not defeated, but exposed. He turned on her. You think he is helping you? Claire did not answer. Richard stepped closer. He is using you to enter a business he could never control. Dominic did not react. Richard continued. When this is over, you will belong to another man with better manners. The sentence struck something old inside Claire. Years of Margaret's corrections. Years of Richard speaking over her. Years of being treated like an accessory to Ethan's life. Claire stepped forward. I belonged to no one when I married your son. Richard's eyes sharpened. I belonged to no one when you threw me out. Her voice remained calm. And I do not belong to Dominic now. She turned slightly toward him. Dominic met her gaze. He did not correct her. He did not claim her. Claire looked back at Richard. You cannot understand that because every person near you is either owned afraid or paid. Whitman looked down. Richard's face went still. Claire noticed the shape beneath his coat pocket. Her ring. A faint circle pressed against the fabric. She extended her hand. Give it back. Richard did not move. It is Caldwell property. It is my wedding ring. It belonged to my mother. Ethan gave it to me. He had no right. Claire's breath caught. Dominic rose from the chair. The room changed. Richard's eyes moved to him. Dominic said, Return the ring. Richard looked around the club. Every conversation had stopped. He understood the choice. Refuse and the humiliation would deepen. Comply, and everyone would see him yield. He reached into his pocket. The platinum band caught the amber light. For 1 second he held it between 2 fingers. Claire remembered Ethan slipping it onto her hand in a small church near the lake. He had whispered that it was the only beautiful thing his family had ever passed down. Richard dropped it toward the table. Claire caught it before it struck the wood. Her fingers closed around it. The metal was warm from his pocket. She could not breathe. Dominic's voice reached her quietly. Put it somewhere safe. Claire slid the ring onto her finger. It stopped halfway at the swollen knuckle. She winced. Dominic saw it. His jaw tightened. Richard noticed. A hint of satisfaction entered his expression. Then Dominic's phone rang. He answered without looking away from Richard. Vanessa's voice came through the speaker. The second lender has frozen the facility. Richard's satisfaction vanished. Vanessa continued. Northstar has requested an emergency review of Caldwell collateral. Dominic ended the call. The acquisition is suspended, he said. Richard looked at him with naked hatred. You think this hurts me? No. Dominic stepped closer. I think it introduces you to uncertainty. Richard said nothing. Dominic turned toward Claire. We are leaving. Claire looked at Whitman. He appeared older than he had 10 minutes earlier. She leaned toward him. When Richard decides you are the reason this failed, he will not save you. Whitman's lips parted. Claire straightened. You know how to reach us. Outside, the rain had weakened to a cold mist. Dominic opened the car door. Claire entered, then looked down at the ring resting against her swollen finger. The seam inside the band caught the light. She frowned. What is it? Dominic asked. Claire turned the ring slowly. There is a line here. He moved closer. A nearly invisible cut ran along the inner edge. Claire pressed it with her thumbnail. Nothing happened. Back at the Belladonna, Vanessa placed the ring beneath a magnifying lamp. Marco brought a small metal tool. Claire stood beside the table, both hands pressed against its edge. Vanessa examined the seam. This was modified. Can you open it? Claire asked. Probably. Dominic stood across from her. Carefully. Vanessa inserted the tool. A faint click sounded. The inner band separated. Something small fell onto the black cloth. A brass key. Claire stared at it. No one spoke. Attached to the key was a narrow metal tag. 3 characters had been engraved into the surface. C19. Vanessa picked it up with tweezers. I know this numbering system. Claire looked at her. We're a private archive beneath Union Station. Dominic's eyes moved to Claire. Vanessa checked the database on her tablet. Her expression changed. What? She looked up. Locker C19 was accessed the night before Ethan's crash. Claire closed her fingers around the wedding ring. By whom Vanessa turned the screen toward them. The access record contained only one name, Ethan Caldwell. His name sat alone on Vanessa's screen. Claire stared at the access record while the small brass key rested on the table between them. The wedding ring lay open beside it, its hidden compartment exposed beneath the magnifying lamp. For weeks before his death, Ethan had carried a secret against Claire's skin. He had placed the ring back on her finger, kissed her hand, and told her to keep it close. He had known Richard might search his office. He had known the house was not safe, and he had trusted Claire without telling her why. Dominic looked at the timestamp. 11:43 at night. Vanessa enlarged the security entry. The locker was accessed using Ethan's private identification code. The archive requires a fingerprint and a personal key. Claire looked at the brass key. So he was there. Yes, the night before the crash. Vanessa nodded. Claire tried to remember that evening. Ethan had come home after midnight. His coat had smelled like cold air and train smoke. She had been sitting at the kitchen counter with a cup of tea waiting for him. He looked exhausted. She asked where he had been. He said the office. She knew he was lying, but he crossed the room, wrapped his arms around her, and held her so tightly that she stopped asking questions. The next morning, he took her wedding ring and said the setting needed repair. Claire closed her eyes. He went to the archive, then he hid the key inside my ring. Dominic watched her carefully. He wanted to make certain Richard could not find it. He could have told me. Maybe he believed not knowing would protect you. Claire opened her eyes. It did not. No one answered. The truth was too visible in the bruises beneath her sleeves. Dominic picked up the key. We go now. Vanessa glanced at the clock. The archive closes at 2, then call ahead. It does not work that way. Dominic looked at her. Vanessa took out her phone. I will call ahead. Claire reached for her coat. Dominic stopped her with one glance. You should rest. She took the coat anyway. My husband hid something beneath a train station the night before someone altered his brakes. We do not know that yet. We know enough. Dominic did not argue again. Chicago Union Station was nearly empty when they arrived. The great hall rose around them in pale stone and shadow. Rows of wooden benches stretched beneath the vaulted ceiling. A few travelers slept beside their bags while cleaning crews moved quietly across the floor. Claire had passed through the station dozens of times. She had never known a private archive existed beneath it. Vanessa led them past a locked service door near the south corridor. Marco walked ahead, scanning every entrance. 2 of Dominic's men remained behind them. A narrow staircase descended beneath the station. The sound of trains became a distant vibration inside the walls. At the bottom, they entered a tiled passage lined with old pipes and steel doors. The air smelled of dust, concrete, and electricity. Vanessa stopped before an unmarked gray door. A camera tilted toward them. A speaker clicked. Identification. Vanessa held a card beneath the scanner. Private estate retrieval. Locker C-19. Account holder, Ethan Caldwell. Silence followed. Claire felt Dominic move slightly closer to her. The speaker clicked again. The account holder is deceased. I am his wife, Claire said. Legal documentation is required. Dominic stepped toward the camera, opened the door. The speaker remained silent for 2 seconds. Then the lock released. Claire looked at him. You own this place too? No. Then why did they open it? They know someone who does. The archive attendant waiting inside appeared nervous. He was an older man in a brown suit with silver hair and thin glasses. He studied Claire's face, then looked at Dominic and quickly looked away. I remember Mr. Caldwell, he said. Claire moved closer. You saw him that night? Yes, he arrived alone. He seemed distressed. What did he do? He accessed the locker for approximately 20 minutes. Before leaving, he asked whether anyone could open it without both the key and his code. What did you tell him? That the archive could open it under court order? The attendant adjusted his glasses. He asked whether his father could obtain one. Claire's chest tightened. What did you say I said anyone could petition a court? Mr. Caldwell asked me to add a secondary privacy notice. Any request concerning the locker was to be reported directly to him. Did anyone ask? The attendant hesitated. 2 days after his death, a representative from Caldwell Continental contacted us. Who? Charles Whitman. Claire looked toward Dominic. The attorney had known the locker existed. "Did you tell him what was inside?" she asked. "I did not know. Mr. Whitman claimed the contents belonged to the Caldwell Family Trust. He produced a copy of the will." "The false will," Claire said. The attendant's face tightened. The archive rejected the request because the original access key was missing. Dominic placed the brass key on the counter. "It is no longer missing." They entered a private viewing room. The walls were bare. A steel table stood beneath a single white light. A camera watched from the corner. The attendant inserted the key into a metal lock. Claire entered Ethan's identification code, their wedding date. The lock turned. A rectangular drawer slid open. Inside was a black document case, a sealed envelope, and a small silver flash drive. Claire did not touch anything at first. Her hands remained at her sides. Dominic stood beside her, close enough to reach her, but far enough to let the moment remain hers. She lifted the envelope. Her name was written across the front. Claire. The handwriting leaned forward. The final line curved down. This was Ethan's hand. Her vision blurred. She carried the envelope to the table and opened it carefully. Inside were 6 handwritten pages. Claire unfolded the first. "My love, if you are reading this, then I failed to tell you the truth while I still had the chance." She stopped. The words dissolved beneath her tears. Dominic moved toward her. Claire lifted one hand. "Please." He stopped. She took a breath and continued reading. Ethan wrote that Caldwell Continental had hidden illegal operations inside legitimate shipping contracts for more than a decade. Richard used shell companies to inflate construction costs, falsify insurance claims, and move money through freight terminals across Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Some cargo containers were marked as inspected even when they had never been opened. Others disappeared from official routing systems for hours at a time. Ethan discovered the pattern during the North Star acquisition review. The software company had been hired to modernize Caldwell's cargo tracking network. Richard did not want the new system merely to improve operations. He wanted it to erase years of old records and create a private routing channel no regulator could monitor. Ethan refused to sign the final approval. Richard threatened him. At first, Ethan believed the threats concerned his position in the company. Then someone entered his office and removed copies of the audit files. His car was followed. His phone calls were recorded. Dr. Crane began asking unusual questions about Claire's schedule and Ethan's health. Ethan wrote that he planned to meet federal investigators. He had already prepared copies of the evidence, but he did not know whom Richard controlled. He trusted no one inside the company. He barely trusted the police. He trusted Claire. That was why he hid the key in her ring. Claire lowered the letter. A tear fell onto the page. He knew he was in danger. Dominic said nothing. She read the next paragraph. "I wanted to tell you every night. I kept thinking that silence would keep you outside the danger. The truth is that I was afraid you would look at me and see my father's son. I was afraid you would ask me to leave, and I was even more afraid that you would stay." Claire pressed her lips together. The room became the kitchen again. Ethan standing beneath the low light, his coat still on, his arms around her. She had felt him trembling. She thought he was tired. He had been saying goodbye without allowing either of them to understand it. The final page contained instructions. The flash drive held financial records, photographs, audio files, and medical documents. A second envelope was addressed to federal investigators. Ethan had also stored the original version of his will with an independent probate attorney in Milwaukee. Richard did not know the attorney's name. Charles Whitman did. At the bottom of the letter, Ethan had written one final sentence. "You were the only home I ever chose." Claire folded the pages slowly. Her hands shook so badly that the paper whispered against her fingers. Dominic placed a hand on the table. Not on her, near her. A quiet offer. Claire covered his hand with hers. Only for a second. Then she let go. Vanessa connected the flash drive to an isolated laptop. The screen filled with folders, financial records, North Star, medical, Crane, vehicle maintenance, audio. Vanessa opened the medical folder. Claire moved beside her. Hospital charts appeared on the screen. Medication schedules, blood tests, respiratory records, consent forms. Claire recognized the formatting immediately. "These are Ethan's. Can you read them?" Vanessa asked. Claire nodded. At first she examined the numbers as a nurse, Heart rate, oxygen levels, sedation dosage, liver function. Then the wife inside her began to understand what the nurse was seeing. The doses had been changed repeatedly. Ethan received stronger sedatives on nights Claire was removed from the room. His oxygen levels dropped after each adjustment. A medication listed as necessary for pain management had been administered despite a recorded allergic reaction. Claire leaned closer. "That is wrong." Dominic stood behind her. "What this dose? He should never have received this much. Could it have been a mistake once, perhaps not 6 times? She opened another file. A physician authorization appeared beneath the medication change. Dr. Samuel Crane. Claire remembered Crane's hand on her shoulder outside Ethan's hospital room. "You need to trust us." She remembered the locked door, the security guard blocking the hallway, Richard telling her she was becoming disruptive. She opened Ethan's respiratory chart. Her stomach tightened. He was improving. Vanessa looked at her. "The records say his condition was critical. These numbers do not." Claire pointed at the screen. His oxygen requirement decreased. His blood pressure stabilized. His kidney function was recovering. She scrolled downward. Then Crane increased the sedation. Another report appeared. A transfer order. Ethan had been scheduled to move from intensive care to a private rehabilitation center. The transfer was canceled 6 hours before his death. The stated reason was sudden respiratory failure. Claire searched for the corresponding nursing notes. They were missing. "Where are the bedside records?" Vanessa typed several commands. "Deleted. Can you recover them? I will try." Dominic looked toward the folder marked audio. "Open that." Vanessa selected the first recording. Static filled the room. Then Richard Caldwell's voice. "How long will he remain lucid?" Claire stopped breathing. Dr. Crane answered. "It depends on the dosage. I did not ask what it depends on." A pause. "If we maintain the current protocol, he will sleep most of the time. And complications. They would be consistent with his injuries." Richard's voice lowered. "I need certainty." Another pause. Crane sounded nervous. "There is no certainty in medicine." Richard replied, "That is why I am paying you." The recording ended. Claire stood completely still. Vanessa opened the next file. Richard again. "He cannot attend the board meeting." Crane answered, "He is not physically capable. That is not enough. He cannot speak to anyone. His wife keeps asking questions, then remove her." Claire stepped back from the table. Her shoulder struck the wall. Dominic crossed the room. She raised a hand. "No." Her voice came out thin. He stopped. Claire looked at the screen. "That is why they made me leave." No one spoke. "I told them his breathing changed. I told Crane the sedation was too high." Her chest tightened. "I knew." "You suspected," Dominic said. "I knew. You did not know this. I should have. You were surrounded by people lying to you. I was his wife, and they used that against you." Claire shook her head. She could still see Ethan through the glass door of the intensive care room, his face pale beneath the oxygen mask, one hand resting above the blanket, his wedding ring still on his finger. She had pressed her palm against the glass after security removed her. She told him she would be back in the morning. He died alone before dawn. Claire turned away. She walked into the small restroom attached to the viewing room and locked the door. The fluorescent light was too bright. She leaned over the sink and turned on the water. Her hands felt dirty. She washed them. Once, twice, again. She remembered changing Ethan's bandages after the crash. She remembered brushing his hair away from his forehead. She remembered asking whether he was in pain. He tried to answer. Crane said the movement meant nothing. Claire scrubbed harder. The skin beneath the bandage began to burn. A knock sounded against the door. "Claire, Dominic." She did not answer. "Open the door." "No." His voice softened. "I will remain here." She shut off the water. Silence filled the bathroom. Then Dominic spoke through the door. "You were grieving beside a man surrounded by people paid to deceive you." Claire closed her eyes. "I knew his breathing was wrong. You knew something was wrong. That is not the same as knowing his father arranged it. I left him. They removed you. I should have fought harder. You were fighting the people controlling his doctors, his security, and his legal authority." She pressed both hands against the sink. "I promised him I would come back. The guilt does not belong to you. You do not know that. I know what guilt looks like. His voice remained calm, but something inside it had changed. Claire opened the door. Dominic stood alone in the passage. His face revealed nothing but his eyes did. He understood guilt because he carried his own. Claire stepped out. "I do not want Richard frightened," she said. Dominic watched her. "I do not want him to lose one transaction and retreat into another mansion." Her voice steadied. "I want every account opened, every payment traced, every person who helped him named." Dominic nodded once. "And when he has nothing left to hide behind, I want him alive." Dominic's expression hardened slightly. "Why, so he can hear Ethan's name in court, so he can watch the evidence become public, so he can understand that my husband was not weak because he wanted the truth." She looked through the doorway at the laptop. Richard tried to make Ethan disappear inside a hospital room. Her eyes returned to Dominic. "He does not get to disappear in a private room of his own." Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "There are faster ways, I know. Cleaner ways, no, quieter ways." His jaw tightened. Claire continued, "If you force Crane to confess, Richard's lawyers will say the statement was coerced. If Whitman vanishes, they will bury the will with him. I need evidence that survives us. The law does not always protect people like you. Then help me make the truth too expensive to ignore." Dominic stepped closer. "You called me because the law had failed you. I called you because I had no one else." The words struck harder than she intended. A silence opened between them. Claire lowered her voice. "I stayed because I believed you understood the difference between protecting me and owning what happens next." Dominic's eyes became unreadable. "You want my power. I want your help. You want the result without the methods. I want you to choose a method that does not destroy the case. You are asking me to become someone else." "No." Claire held his gaze. "I am asking you to decide whether being feared is the only thing you know how to use." For the first time since she called him, Dominic looked wounded. The emotion vanished almost instantly. He stepped away. "Finish reviewing the files." Then he walked down the corridor. Claire watched him leave. Vanessa remained beside the laptop. "He does not like being questioned," she said. Claire returned to the table. "I noticed. He likes being misunderstood even less." Claire looked toward the closed door. "Did I misunderstand him?" Vanessa considered the question. "No. That is why he left." The vehicle folder contained maintenance records from a Caldwell-owned garage. Ethan's brakes had been inspected one day before the crash. The report showed no problems. A second hidden invoice listed replacement work on the brake line. The mechanic who signed it was named Daniel Ruiz. Vanessa searched the name. No current address. "His bank account closed 3 days after the crash?" Claire asked. "No death record." Vanessa opened another file. A transfer of $150,000 had been made to a company registered under Ruiz's sister's name. The sender was a Caldwell Construction subsidiary. Claire felt her grief become colder, not smaller, sharper. Dominic returned 20 minutes later. His face was composed again. He placed a cup of coffee beside Claire. She looked at it. "Is this another order, no?" She lifted the cup. "Thank you." He nodded. The argument remained between them, but it no longer filled the entire room. Vanessa's phone rang. She answered. Her posture changed almost immediately. When she listened, "Send me the footage." Dominic moved closer. "What happened?" Vanessa ended the call. "Whitman left the club 40 minutes ago. He never reached home. Who took him?" "A black Caldwell security vehicle intercepted his car near Division Street." Claire stood. "Richard." Vanessa opened traffic camera footage. Whitman's sedan appeared at an intersection. A larger vehicle blocked the lane. 2 men pulled him from the rear seat. His driver remained motionless behind the wheel. Dominic looked at the screen. "Where did they go south?" Vanessa traced the vehicle through several cameras until it disappeared near the Calumet Industrial Corridor. Claire looked at Ethan's photographs spread across the table. Shipping yards, containers, warehouse doors. One image showed a red container beneath a faded number painted on concrete. She picked it up. The number looked familiar. She searched through the financial folder and found the same code attached to a property record. "Vanessa." Vanessa moved beside her. Claire pointed. "Is this a warehouse address?" Vanessa entered the code. A map appeared. The location sat near the Calumet River, a Caldwell Continental storage facility that had supposedly been closed for renovation. The vehicle disappeared 3 blocks from there, Vanessa said. Dominic reached for his coat. Marco entered. Dominic gave instructions in a low voice. Claire picked up Ethan's letter and placed it inside her bag. Dominic noticed. You are staying here. No, Claire. Whitman knows where the real Will is. He also knows Richard's accounts and Crane's payments. That is why Richard took him. Dominic stepped closer. This is not a boardroom, I know. There may be armed men inside. I know. You have no training for this. Claire looked at the warehouse photograph. I know how people behave when they are injured and afraid. If Whitman is alive, he may need medical help. Marco has a medic, and I know Whitman. You spoke with him at funerals and dinners. I know what he is afraid of. Dominic's expression darkened. He is afraid of Richard. No. Claire looked at the false will on the screen. He is afraid Richard will decide he is no longer useful. Dominic said nothing. Claire continued. If we enter with guns first, Whitman may believe he is moving from one captor to another. Let me speak to him. You assume we find him alive. I need to. Dominic looked at her for several seconds. Then he turned to Marco. She remains behind you. Claire exhaled. Dominic looked back at her. You follow every instruction. I will follow the reasonable ones. This is not a negotiation. It became one when you agreed. Marco looked away, hiding a reaction. The warehouse stood beside the river behind a rusted chain fence. Rainwater pooled across the loading yard. Broken lamps hung above metal doors. A Caldwell logo had been painted over but remained visible beneath the gray surface. Dominic's vehicle stopped 1 block away. Marco's team moved first. Claire remained inside the sedan with Dominic while Vanessa monitored security cameras from the hotel. There are 6 men inside, Vanessa said through Dominic's phone. 2 near the main entrance, 1 on the upper office level, 3 moving around the rear storage area. Whitman, Dominic asked. I cannot see him. Marco's voice entered the line. South entrance is clear. Dominic opened the car door. Claire followed. The night air smelled of river water and oil. They entered through a side loading bay. The warehouse was dark except for strips of industrial light above the aisles. Metal containers formed narrow corridors. Voices echoed from somewhere ahead. Richard's voice came through the open office door above them. You had one responsibility. Whitman answered, breathless. I did what you asked. You allowed Moretti to obtain the debt. I am an attorney, not a banker. You filed a document that can now be challenged. The original still exists. Claire looked at Dominic. Richard continued. Where I told you, independent counsel. Name. Whitman remained silent. A sharp impact sounded. Claire flinched. Dominic placed one hand against her arm. Richard's voice returned. Give me the name. I cannot. You mean you will not. If the original will disappears after Ethan's copy is exposed, every investigator will look at us. Richard laughed softly. There will be no investigation. Another voice entered. Margaret. Richard Clare froze. Margaret sounded close to the office door. What are you doing here? Richard asked. I followed you. You should have gone home. Why is Charles bleeding? No one answered. Margaret continued. I heard what you said about the hospital. Richard's voice became low. You heard nothing. You told Crane to keep Ethan sedated. He was going to destroy the company. He was our son. He was weak. The word crossed the warehouse like a blade. Margaret's breath broke. Richard continued. He chose that nurse over his own blood. He was prepared to hand everything to federal investigators because she filled his head with fantasies about morality. Claire's hands curled into fists. Dominic leaned close. Stay here. He moved forward with Marco. Claire watched them disappear between the containers. A man stepped from a side aisle behind her. Caldwell security. His hand reached inside his jacket. Claire did not think. She grabbed the red emergency lever mounted on the wall and pulled. A fire alarm screamed through the warehouse. Overhead sprinklers burst open. Water crashed across the lights and concrete. The guard turned toward the alarm. Claire drove her shoulder into him. Pain tore through her ribs, but the movement knocked him off balance. Marco appeared from the shadows and struck the weapon from his hand. Dominic looked back at Claire. His face contained a fury she had never seen. Reasonable instruction, she said through clenched teeth. He moved toward her. Gunfire cracked from the upper level. Dominic pulled Claire behind a steel support column. Marco's men returned fire. Glass shattered above them. Claire heard Margaret scream. Then silence. Dominic touched Claire's face, shoulders, and arms, searching for blood. "I am fine. You pulled an alarm." "He was behind me. You were supposed to remain behind Marco." "I was behind Marco until he left." Dominic's eyes burned. Before he could answer, Whitman cried out from the office. Claire moved. Dominic caught her wrist. She looked at him. "He may be injured." Dominic released her. They climbed the metal stairs. Inside the office, Richard was gone. A rear door stood open. Margaret sat against the wall, soaked by the sprinklers and staring at nothing. Whitman lay beside a chair with the blood running from his forehead. Claire dropped to her knees. "Charles, look at me." His eyes opened. "Claire." "Yes." She checked his breathing and pressed a clean cloth against the wound. "Stay awake. He is going to kill me. Not tonight." Whitman's hand gripped her sleeve. "The will. Where is it, Milwaukee?" "Eleanor Grant, probate attorney." Claire looked at Dominic. Whitman continued. "Ethan contacted her himself. She has the original and a recorded statement." "Why did you help Richard forge the replacement?" Claire asked. Whitman's face twisted. "He owned my debt. He owned my firm. He said Ethan was confused after the crash. You knew he was unconscious." Whitman closed his eyes. Claire pressed harder against the wound. "Look at me." He obeyed. "You are going to testify." Fear filled his face. "Richard will destroy me." Claire lowered her voice. "He already decided to." Whitman looked toward the open rear door. For the first time, he understood. Richard had left him behind. Whitman began to shake. "I will testify." Dominic stepped into the hallway and called Marco. Claire continued treating the wound until the medic arrived. Margaret had not moved. Claire approached her. Margaret looked up. Her makeup had washed away. Without the polished expression, she looked older and terribly small. "Did you know?" Claire asked. Margaret's lips parted. "About the money, some of it. About Ethan." Number Claire searched her face. Margaret began to cry. "I thought Richard was protecting the company. You helped him throw me out. I blamed you." For what? Margaret looked toward the floor. "For making Ethan brave enough to leave us." Claire felt no satisfaction. Only exhaustion. She turned away. Outside the warehouse, paramedics placed Whitman inside an ambulance under Moretti protection. Federal agents could not be contacted until Vanessa secured copies of the evidence and found someone outside Richard's influence. Dominic stood beside the river, speaking with Marco. Claire approached. He ended the conversation. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rainwater moved along the pavement between them. "You could have been killed," Dominic said. "So could Whitman. That is not an answer. It is the answer I have." His jaw tightened. "You left the position I gave you. A man came behind me with a gun. You should have called. There was no time. You pulled a fire alarm and attacked him. I distracted him. You drove your injured shoulder into an armed man." It worked. Dominic stared at her. Claire folded her arms, then winced as pain moved through her ribs. He saw it. His anger changed into something more frightening. Fear. "When I saw you in that aisle," he said, "I understood there are things I cannot control." Claire's voice softened. "That must be difficult for you. It is intolerable." Despite everything, a faint smile touched her mouth. Dominic stepped closer. "I do not want to own your decisions. Then stop deciding which dangers I am allowed to face." "I want you alive. I know." "No, Claire." His voice dropped. "You do not." The air between them became still. Dominic lifted one hand and touched the bruise on her cheek with the back of his fingers. His touch was careful enough to hurt in a different way. Claire looked into his eyes. "What do you want from me?" He answered without hesitation. "You alive." Her breath caught. The warehouse lights blurred behind him. She had spent days surrounded by people who treated love as possession duty, leverage, or blood. Dominic's fear felt different. It was not gentle, but it was honest. Claire touched the front of his shirt. Then she kissed him. The kiss was brief at first, a question neither of them had intended to ask. Dominic remained still for one heartbeat. Then his hand moved to the back of her neck. He kissed her again with controlled intensity, as if every instinct in him wanted more and every part of his discipline refused to take it. Claire pulled away first. Their foreheads nearly touched. Neither apologized. Vanessa's voice came through Dominic's phone. "I need both of you back at the hotel." Dominic closed his eyes for 1 second. Claire almost laughed. He answered the call. "What happened?" "I recovered the missing bedside records from Ethan's hospital server." Claire's smile disappeared. Vanessa continued. "They matched the payments to Crane. We have enough to connect the medication changes to Richard's accounts." "That is good," Claire said. "No, it was good 5 minutes ago." Vanessa's keyboard clicked through the line. "Someone inside Caldwell Continental has initiated a complete server purge." Dominic looked toward the city. "How long less than 2 hours before the financial archive is permanently destroyed?" Claire looked at Ethan's letter inside her bag. The rain continued falling around them. "Then we stop him before midnight." The rain followed them all the way back to Chicago. By the time the convoy reached the Belladonna, midnight was less than 90 minutes away. Claire sat beside Dominic in the rear of the sedan with Ethan's letter inside her coat and the ache from the warehouse spreading beneath her ribs. Neither of them mentioned the kiss by the river. There was no room for it yet. Vanessa was waiting in the hotel command suite when they arrived. Every screen in the room displayed a different layer of Caldwell Continental's network. Shipping routes, employee records, insurance claims, bank transfers, hospital payments, corporate contracts. On the largest screen, a red progress bar moved steadily across a black background. 23% of the central archive had already been erased. Claire stopped in the doorway. "How much can you save?" Vanessa did not look away from her keyboard. "That depends on whether Richard is deleting files or destroying the entire storage structure. What is the difference? Deleted files can be recovered. A destroyed encryption map leaves us with millions of fragments and no way to prove where they came from." Dominic removed his wet coat. "Where's the purge coming from?" "The executive server at Caldwell headquarters. Can you stop it remotely?" I tried. Whoever started it locked out every external administrator. Marco entered behind them. Richard's security teams are moving toward the headquarters. Vanessa opened a city map. Red points appeared around the Caldwell building. 3 vehicles from the Lake Forest estate. 2 from the Calumet property. Another team left the private airfield. Claire looked at Dominic. "He is not running." "No," Dominic said. "He is cleaning the house before anyone can enter it." Vanessa pulled up a list of scheduled corporate events. "There is an emergency board meeting at 11:30. Richard called it 20 minutes after leaving the warehouse." "Why bring the board together while he is destroying evidence?" Claire asked. Dominic walked toward the screen. "Because North Star can still close if the board approves alternate financing." Vanessa nodded. "The first lenders froze their commitments, but Richard has access to an emergency credit structure through Caldwell Maritime Holdings." Claire remembered Ethan talking about that company. "It owns the terminals." "And the land beneath them," Vanessa said. "If the board approves the collateral transfer tonight, Richard can replace the suspended financing and complete the North Star purchase before regulators intervene." Claire looked at the red progress bar. 31%. If he buys North Star, what happens to the evidence? He controls the software meant to rebuild Caldwell's cargo tracking system. Dominic's face remained still. He deletes the past and buys the machinery to hide the future. Claire removed Ethan's letter from her coat and placed it on the table. "What do we need?" Vanessa turned toward her. "To stop the server purge, someone has to enter the building and reconnect the archive to an independent network. To stop the acquisition, we need to challenge Richard's authority in front of the board. Whitman's testimony, useful but not enough by itself. The board can call him compromised. The false will strong, but the original has not arrived from Milwaukee." Claire looked at the time. Eleanor Grant. Vanessa nodded. "She is driving here with Ethan's original will and a recorded statement. The roads are bad. She will not reach Chicago before 1 in the morning." Claire looked toward the Caldwell Tower glowing on the map. "Then we go without it." Dominic turned to her. "You are not entering that building." Claire met his eyes. "My husband's shares are being used to approve this deal. Your legal position is not yet confirmed. Neither is Richard's. That will not stop him from having you removed. I do not need to win a probate case tonight. I need to make the board afraid to vote." Dominic's gaze sharpened. "That is not the same thing. It is enough." Vanessa looked between them. "If Claire enters the meeting and formally disputes the will, every director who votes to transfer the assets risks personal liability." Claire nodded. Richard can threaten them, he can buy them, but he cannot guarantee they stay out of prison. Dominic folded his hands behind his back. You are injured. So is Whitman. He is still giving a statement. You have not slept. Neither has Richard. He has armed security, so do you. The room became quiet. Claire stepped closer. This began when he tried to force me to sign away Ethan's life. I am not sitting in a hotel while he finishes the job. Dominic's expression did not change, but she saw the conflict beneath it. He wanted to protect her. He also knew she was right. Finally, he looked at Marco. You remain with her. Claire exhaled. Dominic continued. She does not leave your sight. Marco nodded. Claire said, I can agree to that. Dominic turned back to her. If the situation changes, you say my name. She looked at him. You will hear me, I always do. Something passed between them. Then Vanessa stood. I will go through the service network from the data center. Dominic can deal with the lenders downstairs. Claire takes the boardroom. Marco looked at the screens, and Richard Clare picked up the copy of the false will. He stays where he can watch everything collapse. The convoy left the Belladonna at 11:12. Caldwell Continental headquarters rose above the Chicago River in black glass and steel. The company name shone across the upper floors, bright enough to reflect against the water. Claire had entered the building hundreds of times beside Ethan. She remembered holiday dinners in the executive dining room, charity events in the atrium, board receptions where Richard introduced her as Ethan's wife and never once used her first name. Tonight, she walked through the front doors beside Dominic Moretti. The lobby security guards reached for their radios. Marco's men entered behind them. No one drew a weapon. No one needed to. The head of security stepped forward. Mrs. Caldwell, you are not authorized to enter the executive floor. Claire removed a folded document from her bag. This is a formal notice disputing the estate transfer and all voting actions taken under the filed will. The guard looked at the paper without touching it. You need to speak with legal counsel. I am speaking to the board. Mr. Caldwell gave specific instructions. Dominic moved to Claire's side. The guard's eyes shifted toward him. Dominic said you should decide whether Richard pays enough for you to obstruct a probate claimant during a criminal investigation. The guard swallowed. Claire pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. She stepped inside. Marco followed. Dominic entered last. On the executive floor, the atmosphere was different. Assistants moved quickly through the corridor carrying files and laptops. 2 employees were shredding documents inside a conference room. A security officer was removing hard drives from an office. Claire stopped. Marco. He saw it. One of his men lifted a phone and began recording. Claire walked into the conference room. The employees froze. Put the documents down. A woman near the shredder looked towards security. We were told these were scheduled for disposal, by whom Mr. Caldwell's office. Claire pulled a half-shredded page from the machine. It contained wire transfer instructions to a company in the Cayman Islands. She placed it on the table. Nothing else leaves this floor. The security officer stepped forward. You do not have the authority to give that order. Dominic's voice came from the doorway. She does now. The man looked at him and moved back. Claire continued toward the boardroom. The doors were closed. Voices carried through the wood. Richard was already speaking. The financing interruption is temporary. Caldwell Maritime can secure the remaining obligation. We approve the transfer tonight and North Star closes on schedule. Claire opened the doors. The room fell silent. 12 directors sat around a long black table beneath the Caldwell family crest. Financial reports covered the polished surface. Several attorneys stood along the walls. Richard occupied the chairman's seat. Margaret was absent. Charles Whitman's chair remained empty. Claire entered with Marco behind her. Dominic stopped outside the room. Richard looked at Claire as if she were something dragged in from the street. You have no place here. Claire walked toward Ethan's empty chair. Neither do you. Several directors shifted. Richard's voice hardened. This is a private board meeting. Claire placed the disputed will notice in front of the corporate secretary. I am Ethan Caldwell's surviving spouse and the beneficiary named in his original estate documents. Richard stood. There are no original documents. There are. You have nothing but accusations provided by criminals. Claire pulled out the forensic report Vanessa had prepared. The will filed by Charles Whitman was created using software released after Ethan's death. The signature was traced. The notary license was invalid. The corporate secretary looked at the report. Richard turned toward him. "Do not touch that." The secretary stopped. Claire looked around the table. "Each of you is being asked to approve the transfer of assets that may not legally belong to the family trust." A director named Paul Merrick leaned forward. "Mrs. Caldwell, are you represented by counsel? Independent counsel is bringing Ethan's original will to Chicago. When tonight?" Richard laughed. "This is theater." Claire faced him. "No. Theater is holding a board meeting before midnight while your employees destroy company records downstairs." The directors began speaking at once. Richard's face changed, only slightly, but Claire saw it. Paul Merrick looked toward the attorneys. "Are records being destroyed?" Richard raised one hand. Routine disposal. "Nothing more." Marco placed his phone on the table. The video from the conference room began playing. Employees feeding documents into shredders, security removing hard drives, wire transfer records torn in half. The boardroom went still. Richard looked at Marco. "You recorded company personnel without authorization." Claire answered. "They were destroying evidence connected to a disputed estate and an active financial investigation." One of the attorneys stepped forward. "There is no confirmed active investigation." Claire reached into her bag and placed a second file on the table. "These are payments from a Caldwell subsidiary to Dr. Samuel Crane during Ethan's hospitalization." Richard's eyes turned cold. Claire continued. "The same dates correspond to unauthorized changes in Ethan's medication." A director whispered, "What is she saying?" Richard struck the table with his palm. "She is grieving. Moretti has manipulated her." Claire looked at the men and women around the table. "My husband survived his car crash. He was improving. Then his private physician increased his sedation after I was removed from the hospital using a forged medical proxy." The corporate secretary stared at the documents. Claire's voice remained steady. Ethan recorded Richard asking how long he would remain lucid. Richard's face became completely still. That was the moment the room began to believe her. Not because Claire cried. She did not. Not because Dominic stood outside with armed men. He remained beyond the glass. They believed her because Richard Caldwell no longer looked offended. He looked afraid. 11:28. 2 floors below, Vanessa entered the private data center with 3 Moretti technicians. The central server room was protected by a biometric lock. Her stolen administrator card failed. A warning appeared. Access revoked. She opened a maintenance panel and connected her tablet directly to the door controller. The lock resisted. Behind her, the elevator chimed. Caldwell's security appeared at the end of the hall. Vanessa did not turn. "How long?" Marco's man asked. "Longer if you keep asking." The guards approached. Step away from the door. The Moretti men remained in place. One of the guards reached for his weapon. The lights flickered. The door unlocked. Vanessa smiled once. "Thank you." They entered and sealed it behind them. Inside, rows of servers glowed blue beneath cold white lights. The purge bar on Vanessa's tablet reached 52%. She connected an independent storage system to the main archive. Nothing happened. A message appeared. "Encryption structure collapsing." Vanessa swore under her breath. One technician looked at the server map. "The backup index is gone." "No," she said. "Ethan built one. You do not know that. He knew Richard would erase everything." She searched the directory structure. Hundreds of folders opened and vanished as the purge continued. North Star, legal, contracts, compliance, legacy. She stopped. "Open North Star due diligence." The technician obeyed. Inside the folder were software test files, vendor reports, and routing simulations. One file had no extension. Vanessa selected it. A password field appeared. She tried Ethan's corporate identification. Rejected. His wedding date. Rejected. Claire's hospital employee number, which Vanessa had found in old records. Rejected. The purge reached 59%. Vanessa looked at the file name. Home. She remembered the line in Ethan's letter that Claire had read aloud. "You were the only home I ever chose." Vanessa typed Claire. Rejected. She typed Bennett. The file opened. A hidden index began rebuilding the deleted archive. The technician stared at the screen. He embedded the map inside the North Star Review. Vanessa connected the storage drive. Copy everything. A transfer window appeared. 14 minutes remaining. In a private office below the boardroom, Dominic sat across from representatives of 3 North Star lenders. No one touched the coffee on the table. A senior banker named Harold Pierce closed the evidence file Dominic had placed before him. These records have not been authenticated. They will be, Dominic said. Your position in the Caldwell debt does not give you authority to interfere with separate financing. No, your obligation to protect your institution does. Pierce leaned back. You are threatening us. I am explaining exposure. Another lender studied the payments to shell companies. If this becomes public, every Caldwell asset could be frozen. Dominic looked at him. It is already becoming public. Pierce's phone vibrated. He read the message. His face changed. A national financial publication had received Caldwell transaction records. Another message arrived. Federal investigators were requesting preservation of all lending documents connected to North Star. Dominic remained silent. Pierce looked at him. You sent these files to the press. I sent nothing. That was true. Vanessa had done it. Pierce stood and walked toward the window. Below, news vehicles were already arriving outside the Caldwell Tower. The second lender closed her folder. Our bank is suspending participation. Pierce turned. You cannot make that decision alone. I do not need to. Legal already approved it. The third lender checked his phone. So has ours. Pierce looked at Dominic. You planned this before tonight? No. Dominic adjusted one cuff. Richard planned it for years. I only removed the walls hiding it. At 11:41, North Star Systems suspended the acquisition. At 11:43, Caldwell Continental's emergency credit facility was frozen. At 11:45, the company's stock began collapsing in after-hours trading. The numbers appeared on a screen inside the boardroom. Several directors stared at their phones. Richard remained at the head of the table. This is temporary, he said. No one answered. Claire watched the stock price fall. The Caldwell name had once seemed permanent to her, engraved into buildings, printed across hospital wings, spoken at charity dinners with admiration. Now it was a line moving downward on a screen. Paul Merrick looked at Richard. You told us financing was secured. It was. You told us the estate issue had been resolved. It has. The widow is standing in front of us with evidence of a forged will. Richard turned toward Claire. She has no evidence. She has fragments stolen by Dominic Moretti. Claire placed Ethan's letter on the table. He left this for me. Richard's eyes moved to the handwriting. He recognized it. Claire saw the recognition. He knew about the shipping account, she said. He knew about North Star. He knew you were recording him. Richard's expression remained controlled. He was unstable after the accident. He wrote it before the crash. He was always emotional. He was afraid of you. Richard stepped away from the chairman's seat. My son enjoyed everything this family gave him, then decided morality was more important than survival. Claire's voice lowered. He chose not to become you. Richard's face tightened. The boardroom doors opened. Margaret entered. Her hair was damp from the rain. She wore the same dark coat from the warehouse. Without her usual composure, she looked like a woman who had aged years in a single night. Richard stared at her. You should not be here. Margaret carried a blue folder. I found this in your private safe. She placed it on the table. Claire opened the folder. Inside was Ethan's original medical proxy. It named Claire as the sole person authorized to make treatment decisions. Ethan's signature appeared at the bottom. Real, forward-leaning. The final stroke pulled downward. Claire touched the page. Richard's voice turned dangerous. Margaret. She looked at him. You changed it. No one moved. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. You replaced Claire's name with yours after the crash. Richard stepped toward her. You do not understand what you found. I heard you at the warehouse. His face hardened. You were hysterical. You told Charles that Ethan's recovery would destroy the company. Richard lowered his voice. Be careful. Margaret almost laughed. It was a broken sound. Our son is dead and you are still giving orders. Richard looked around the room. Every director was watching. Margaret continued. I knew about the accounts. Claire turned toward her. Margaret's voice shook. I knew Richard moved money through the construction companies. I knew Charles changed documents. I told myself it was business. She looked at Claire. I did not know what happened in the hospital. Claire held her gaze. You helped them remove me. Margaret closed her eyes. Yes, you helped throw me out of Ethan's house. Yes. Why? Margaret looked at Richard. Because blaming you was easier than admitting what my husband had become. Claire felt no relief, no forgiveness, only the cold weight of the truth. Margaret faced the board. I will testify. Richard moved so quickly that Marco reached beneath his jacket. Richard stopped beside Margaret. You will do no such thing. She looked at him. You cannot frighten me anymore. Richard's mouth tightened. Then the lights went out. The entire floor fell into darkness. Someone screamed. Emergency lights flashed red along the walls. Claire heard chairs scraping and people moving. Marco caught her arm. Stay close. A gunshot cracked from the corridor. Glass shattered. The board members dropped beneath the table. Marco pulled Claire behind Ethan's chair. Another shot struck the wall. Richard's voice came through the dark. Everyone stay where you are. A battery lamp flickered on near the boardroom doors. Richard stood beside them with a handgun in his right hand. One of his own security men lay unconscious in the corridor. Marco reached toward his weapon. Richard pointed the gun at Claire. Do not. Marco stopped. Richard closed the boardroom doors and locked them. The red emergency lights painted his face in shadow. Margaret stared at the weapon. Richard put it down. He ignored her. Claire rose slowly. Marco whispered, Stay down. Richard aimed at her chest. I said, stand. Claire stood. The pain in her ribs sharpened, but she kept her shoulders straight. Richard walked toward her. Around them, board members crouched beneath the table, silent now. You should have signed the waiver, he said. Claire looked at the gun. You should have left Ethan alive. His eyes changed. Ethan made his choice. He chose the truth. He chose weakness. He survived the crash. Richard's hand tightened around the weapon. He was going to destroy thousands of jobs. No, he was going to expose you. You think those are different things? Claire looked around the boardroom. This company existed before your crimes. It exists because of me. It is collapsing because of you. Richard stepped closer. You know nothing about building an empire. I know what it looks like when one is bleeding. You are a nurse. Yes. The word landed without shame. I have watched powerful men beg for one more breath. I have watched poor families give everything they had to save someone they loved. None of them were as weak as you are now. Richard raised the gun toward her face. Margaret whispered his name. Claire did not move. You came into my family with nothing, Richard said. I came with a life. You wanted Ethan's money. I wanted Ethan. He was never enough for you. He was more than you deserved. Richard's face twisted. For the first time, his control broke completely. He would have handed the company to federal agents because you filled his head with virtue. Claire saw it then. Not regret, not grief, jealousy. Richard had not merely hated Ethan's decision. He hated that his son had chosen Claire's values over his. Claire's voice softened. No, Richard. Ethan turned against you when he finally understood you. Richard moved the gun closer. Without the Caldwell name, you are nothing. Claire looked at Ethan's empty chair, then at the false will lying open on the table. If I am nothing, why did you need to forge his signature silence? Richard's eyes flickered. Claire continued. Why did you need Crane to keep him unconscious? Stop. Why did you need guards to remove me? Stop talking. Why did you need 6 men to throw one grieving woman into the rain? Richard's breathing changed. Claire heard movement outside the doors, very faint. Metal against metal. Marco heard it too. He remained still. Claire looked at Richard. You were afraid of Ethan. Richard's finger tightened near the trigger. And now you are afraid of me. Say one more word. Claire thought of Dominic downstairs, his voice in the hotel suite. If the situation changes, you say my name. She looked at the gun, then at Richard, Dominic. The boardroom lights went dark again. Complete darkness. A shot exploded. Claire felt Marco pull her down. The doors burst inward. Men shouted. A body struck the table. When the emergency lights returned, Richard was on the floor. Marco had twisted his arm behind his back. The gun lay several feet away. Dominic stood over him. Blood marked the side of Dominic's face where shattered glass had cut his skin. He lifted Richard by the collar and struck him once. The sound echoed through the room. Richard fell against the table. Dominic picked up the gun. He aimed it at Richard's head. No one moved. Richard looked up at him. The arrogance was gone. Dominic's face revealed nothing. That was more frightening than rage. "You touched her," he said. Richard breathed heavily. "You need me alive." "No." Claire rose. Her ears rang from the gunshot. "Dominic." He did not look at her. Richard tried to smile. "She controls you." Dominic's finger rested near the trigger. Claire crossed the room. "Look at me." His eyes shifted toward her. She saw the violence in him. Not wild, not careless. A choice waiting to be made. Claire stepped between Dominic and Richard. Marco tightened his hold on Richard. He wanted Ethan to disappear inside a private room, Claire said. Dominic's jaw clenched. "Move! No! He tried to kill you, and he failed. That does not change what he deserves." Claire looked at Richard. "He deserves to hear every charge. He deserves to sit in court while strangers read Ethan's words aloud. He deserves to watch the Caldwell name become evidence." Dominic's gaze remained on her. Claire lowered her voice. "Do not give him a private ending." The room held its breath. Dominic looked at Richard one final time. Then he lowered the gun. Sirens rose outside the building. Federal agents entered the executive floor minutes later. Vanessa had sent the recovered archive to the United States Attorney's Office, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and 3 national news organizations at the same time. No single person could bury it now. Agents moved through the boardroom, collected weapons, separated witnesses, and secured every document. Richard Caldwell was placed in handcuffs. He stared at Claire while an agent read the charges connected to fraud, money laundering, obstruction, witness intimidation, and conspiracy. The investigation into Ethan's death remained open, but Dr. Samuel Crane had been detained attempting to leave Illinois by private plane. Daniel Ruiz, the mechanic who altered Ethan's brakes, had been located in Indiana. He agreed to cooperate after learning Richard had ordered the closure of the account used to pay him. Charles Whitman gave a recorded statement from a secure medical facility. Margaret surrendered Ethan's medical proxy and access to Richard's private safe. The board members remained inside the room for questioning. No one defended Richard. As agents led him toward the doors, he stopped beside Claire. "You think this company will follow you?" Claire looked at the handcuffs around his wrists. "No." His mouth curved slightly. "Then you have already lost." Claire stepped closer. "I do not need it to follow me." Her voice remained calm. "I need it to survive you." Richard was taken away. The boardroom slowly emptied. Margaret remained near the windows. Claire stood beside Ethan's chair with one hand resting on the back. Dominic approached. A thin line of blood ran from the cut near his temple. Claire touched it gently. "You are hurt. It is a scratch." That is what difficult patients say. His eyes held hers. "You were standing in front of a gun. So were you. I came into the room after he pointed it at you." Claire examined the cut. "You broke the door. Marco broke the door. You broke Richard. Once." She looked at him. Dominic added, "He remained conscious." Despite the exhaustion, she almost smiled. A federal agent approached. "Mrs. Caldwell, there is an attorney downstairs asking for you." Eleanor Grant. Claire turned. The original will had arrived. They met Eleanor in a private conference room. She was in her 60s, with silver hair pulled neatly behind her head and a leather case held against her chest. "I am sorry I did not come sooner," she said. Claire shook her hand. "Did Ethan contact you 6 weeks before the crash?" Eleanor opened the case. Inside was a sealed document, a memory card, and a notarized statement. "Ethan believed his family attorney was compromised. He asked me to prepare a new will and hold it outside Illinois." Claire looked at the seal. "Did he explain why he said his father had begun moving company assets without board approval? He feared his shares would be used to protect criminal activity." Eleanor broke the seal. Ethan's valid will left Claire his personal residence, his private accounts, his charitable foundation authority, and his direct shares in Caldwell Continental. A separate clause transferred control of the family voting trust to Claire if Richard were formally accused of fraud involving company assets. Claire read the clause twice. He planned for this. He hoped it would never be necessary, Eleanor said. The attorney inserted the memory card into a secure laptop. Ethan appeared on the screen. He sat in an office Claire did not recognize. He wore a navy sweater and looked tired, alive. Claire covered her mouth. Ethan looked directly into the camera. "My name is Ethan James Caldwell. I am recording this statement freely and without pressure." He confirmed the will. He described his concerns about Richard. Then his voice softened. "If Claire is watching this, then I was not able to explain everything myself." Claire's eyes filled. Ethan continued. "My wife was the only person in my life who loved me without needing me to become someone else." Claire lowered her head. A tear struck the table. "She gave me a home that had nothing to do with buildings, accounts, or names. Everything I leave to her is not payment for that love. It is trust." The recording ended. Claire remained still. The room blurred around her. She had spent days believing Ethan died afraid and alone. Now his voice had reached her through the walls Richard built. Dominic stood beside her. He did not touch her until Claire reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers. Outside the Caldwell Tower, morning approached behind the clouds. News vans filled the street. Employees gathered behind barriers. Reporters shouted questions as federal agents carried boxes through the lobby. Claire could have left through the private garage. Instead, she walked toward the main entrance. Dominic followed several steps behind, not leading her, not shielding her from view, standing close enough to act if she needed him. The doors opened. Camera flashes struck like white lightning. Reporters called her name. "Mrs. Caldwell, did your father-in-law arrange your husband's death? Did Dominic Moretti help you take control of the company? Are you claiming ownership of Caldwell Continental? Were you involved in the release of confidential documents?" Claire stopped before the microphones. The city moved around her. Police lights flashed against wet pavement. The Chicago River rolled dark beneath the bridge. She thought of Ethan in the hospital, of the ring hidden against her skin, of the marble floor, of the rain outside the gates. "My husband tried to tell the truth," Claire said. The shouting quieted. His family used money, fear, and influence to silence him. They altered his medical authority, forged his will, and attempted to destroy the records he preserved. A reporter called out, "Did Dominic Moretti help you seize this company?" Claire looked toward Dominic. He stood beyond the lights, in a black coat, blood still visible near his temple. "He helped me survive long enough to reclaim what was stolen." The cameras turned toward him. Dominic's gaze remained on Claire. She faced the reporters again. "But I am standing here because Ethan left the truth." Claire lifted her chin, "and because I chose not to run from it." 3 months later, the Caldwell name was gone from the tower above the Chicago River. In its place, silver letters stretched across the glass entrance. Bennett Harbor Group. Claire stood across the street beneath a gray morning sky and watched employees pass through the revolving doors. Some carried coffee. Others balanced folders against their chests while checking their phones. No one stopped to admire the new sign. That pleased her. A company was not a name carved into stone. It was the people arriving before sunrise to keep it alive. Claire crossed the street. Inside the lobby, the portraits of Richard Caldwell and the men before him had been removed. The walls now displayed photographs of freight workers, mechanics, dispatchers, and ship crews. Ethan's portrait remained near the executive elevators, not as an heir, as a whistleblower. Claire touched 2 fingers to the wedding ring hanging from a chain beneath her blouse. Then the elevator doors opened. The board was waiting for her upstairs. A labor dispute had shut down operations at the Southside terminal. Workers refused to return until damaged cranes were repaired. Unpaid overtime was restored, and the pension reductions approved under Richard were reversed. Several directors wanted to replace them with contractors. Claire entered the boardroom carrying a thick file. Dominic stood near the windows, dressed in black, silent among men who still did not know whether to fear him or study him. He did not sit beside her chair. He never took Ethan's place. Claire set the file on the table. Paul Merrick spoke first. "We are losing nearly $2 million each day." Claire opened the file. "We lost more than that last year hiding equipment failures." A director leaned forward. "The pension demand is excessive. So were the bonuses Richard paid while cutting retirement benefits. This company cannot repair every injustice at once. No, Claire said, but it can stop creating new ones. She distributed accident reports across the table. 3 injuries had been classified as employee error. Maintenance records proved the equipment had failed. Claire had spent the previous 2 days at the terminal walking through loading yards in a hard hat and steel toe boots. She had spoken with operators who had worked there longer than she had been alive. They did not trust her. She had not asked them to. She had asked them to show her the machines. Now she presented the board with a phased repair schedule, a revised pension structure, and the cost of losing experienced crews during the busiest shipping quarter. The numbers left little room for argument. Paul read the final page. This plan reduces executive bonuses. Claire looked around the table. Yes, no one volunteered an objection. The vote passed. After the meeting, the directors left in silence. Dominic remained near the glass. Claire gathered her papers. You did not say anything. You did not need me to. She looked at him. I wanted you here. Something softened in his expression. That distinction mattered. Claire had spent too long being told that protection required obedience. Dominic was learning that standing beside her did not mean standing in front of her. So was she. The Caldwell estate sold 1 week later. Claire visited the mansion before the new owners arrived. The rooms were empty. Furniture had been removed. Pale rectangles marked the walls where paintings once hung. She entered the foyer alone. The marble floor looked smaller than she remembered. This was where Richard had forced her down, where Margaret had watched, where a guard had torn the ring from her hand. Rain touched the windows gentle now. Dominic waited near the open front door. Claire removed the ring from beneath her blouse and held it in her palm. For a moment she saw Ethan standing at the altar, smiling as he slid it onto her finger. She closed her hand around it. Then she placed it back against her heart. The money from the sale established the Ethan Bennett Memorial Trauma Fund at the hospital where Claire once worked. It paid emergency costs for patients without insurance and provided legal protection for medical workers who reported dangerous care. Claire did not place her own name on the foundation. Ethan had tried to tell the truth. His name deserved to remain attached to it. Margaret awaited sentencing in a private detention facility outside Chicago. Claire visited once. Margaret sat across from her behind a plain wooden table. Without the estate, the jewelry, and the servants, she looked almost unfamiliar. Richard blames me, Margaret said. He blames everyone except himself. Margaret lowered her eyes. Can you forgive me? Claire looked at the woman who had watched her son die, then blamed his widow because grief was easier when pointed at someone weaker. No. Margaret's face tightened. Claire continued. But you can spend the rest of your life telling the truth. Tears filled Margaret's eyes. Did Ethan love you until the end? Claire touched the ring beneath her blouse. Yes. Margaret began to cry. Claire stood and left without comforting her. Compassion did not require surrender. Outside, Dominic waited beside the car. He did not ask what Margaret had said. He opened the door and Claire entered. That evening she found him on the roof of the Belladonna Hotel. Chicago stretched beneath them in gold and shadow. The river moved quietly between the buildings. A small glass frame rested on the table. Inside was the laminated card Claire had carried for 3 years. One debt, no questions. A silver plate beneath it contained 4 words. Debt paid. Choice remains. Claire looked at Dominic. What choice? Whether you stay because you need me or because you want me. The city wind moved through her hair. Claire set the frame down. I stopped needing rescue a long time ago. Dominic's face became still. She stepped closer. I stayed anyway. He touched her cheek. The gesture was careful, though the bruises had faded weeks before. Claire kissed him. This time there was no crisis waiting outside the door. No blood on marble, no gun raised in a boardroom. Only choice. Only the city. Only 2 people who had survived different kinds of darkness and refused to lie about what remained inside them. The next morning, Dominic entered Claire's boardroom carrying a partnership agreement between Bennett Harbor Group and several East Coast ports. Claire read every page. Then she crossed out the clause giving his company controlling interest. Dominic watched her. You changed the agreement. I improved it. You removed my authority. You were never getting it. He looked at the revised terms. What do I get? Claire slid a pen across the table. A partner. Dominic signed. Months earlier, Claire had sat outside iron gates in the rain with no home, no money, and no future she could see. Now she stood above Chicago with Ethan's ring near her heart and her own name on the wall. Dominic came to stand beside her, not ahead of her, beside her. "They thought throwing me out would end my story," Claire said. Dominic closed the agreement. It did. She turned toward him. That woman never came back. Claire looked across the river as freight trains moved through the city below. "No," she said. "She built something better."